area underneath.
So a while back, I played in a band actually at a event, and sat the camera down in front of us in front of the stage, and then had the iPad on my stand. I'm a trumpet player, and about a quarter of the time when I should have been watching the music, I was fiddling with the app. So that's one of the other things that's kind of can be a distraction when you're doing that. If you're doing it when you're intending to do something, you may find it distracting. Like you'll probably see me today fiddling, but I will try not to. So anyway, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Before you, I found that I know this is a Linux user group and iPhone is horrible, but I found that if anybody lost a lightning cable out front on your way in, let me know. All right, so welcome.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. As you guys can see, we're going to be talking, Doug's going to do an intro to AWS Cloud Formation. The past few months we've been kind of on an AWS kick, so why not one more? Next month I need a speaker because the person who I thought was going to be able to do it won't be able to do it next month. So if there's anything that you want to talk about, for example, I'm going to talk my son when he's here over the summer into doing a talk on Stellarium because he likes stars and physics and crap that Stellarium would be cool about. A good thing to talk about. If you have anything like that you enjoy messing with, that you think people would be interested in, please let me know because we need somebody for next month. I won't be here, but Mark, who let you in the door down there, he will be running it next month.
And also, if you don't necessarily want to speak but have a topic, let us know.
Yeah, and we can maybe find somebody that can talk on that subject. But we really do need somebody for next month. I only found out yesterday when I asked him that he can't do it, so that kind of killed me. How many people here are looking for a job? How many people have companies that are looking for people for a job? All right, after the meeting, both groups of people come up here and you can talk and maybe you'll find your next job. Unfortunately, Susie couldn't make it today, so you can't talk to her. But does anyone have anything they want to bring up? Any thoughts, concerns?
Elder, you want to talk a little bit about your swag?
Yeah.
Yes, so I brought some stuff up there in the front with some Red Hat logos and
Yes,
stuff.
we've got cups and we've got...
Yeah, mostly mugs, but there are a few other things like
koozies.
I
I assume this is a bottle opener?
Yes, correct.
This
would probably
is
require a battery, but
a high-tech bottle opener.
yes.
I opened it, I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah, you put it on the bottle and press the button.
And it does what it does.
Yeah, and I don't know whether the first is gone.
No, the frisbee's still here.
That requires some magnetic stuff that you can throw at.
Ah, a magnetic dartboard. And then there's
Some, it's a
keychain, whatever.
kind of thing. Whatever, feel free to bring.
And of course, there's a lightning cord.
Yeah.
So going back to the Wayback Machine, when you held up the magnetic thing, my first thought was, oh, it's distribution DVDs. So that was funny. That was my first thought.
Yeah. That'll be worth money these days, so I don't think we'll give those away. But
Yeah, I've got a Red Hat 5.2 still in the box.
I met the guy who wrote the book, and I went back to get the book so I could sign them because I had those two. Half them past tense. I threw them all out because they were way out of date.
Yeah.
I'm so
Matt,
one of my worst days I read at realizing I didn't have those books anymore.
All right. So with that,
Actually,
yeah.
Peter, along the lines of 2 weeks ago, know, I attended the Linux meeting down in Fredericksburg.
So did Peter. I saw that.
Yeah, and I want to say, not that this group is, this is a good group as well, but you might want to look out and see, they have some different topics as well, and also a pretty good presentation also.
And then one other thing that reminded me, I am searching for a new location because, as you guys have seen, because I'm sure you get the updates, we are pretty much outgrowing this room. There is a place that that I've been to for a couple meetings, and I have to see if I can talk them into doing weekend meetings. But if any of you have companies that have a meeting room probably bigger than this, looking to hold up to I'd say 70 would be a good.
I would say, if you know some place where there's an auditorium, typically any company that does training and stuff like that for larger groups will have something like that. And we have connections. We may need to ask nicely, but sometimes they will allow us in on weekends because they don't use it anyway. We don't meet. We have tried to come up with another time to meet on weekdays. It gets voted out every time.
Yeah, I don't want to come on weekdays. Yeah.
What is the number of people that you're looking to have in a room?
So right now we can have about 50 in here, and that's what we are growing. So any number higher than that, typically, at least the last 3-4 months, we've had 70+ people signing on.
Now, keeping in mind that we also are realistic and we know that not all 70 people are going to show up. But we, at the rate we're going, because I'd say 5 months ago, we didn't have an issue.
It depends on the topic very often. I see a lot of new faces, and I'm pretty sure you're here because you saw the topic, not because it's NOVALUG. But this is also what should drive the talks we have. We want to see a lot of people. So we don't want to have a topic that's, only 5 people want to show up. Well, that's kind of boring too. So this helps, right? It helps to say, wow, this is what people want to talk about, and we'll do that. But anyway, there are lots of reasons why this room might be outgoing. And so having alternatives at the very least would be nice. We have never paid for it. And every time I see a charge for it, it's not something we would ever be able to do. It's way too high for a group at our house. And it's not like we could just pay $5 each, and it will be a lot more.
Yeah.
Are we an official.org?
We used to be part of what's called Tux. Long story short, it no longer exists. So we know 503C or whatever it's called, or I can't remember.
501c.
501c, sorry, yeah.
It's easy to donate space when you're
Yeah,
over.
we used to be part of an organization that officially was that.
Yeah.
They used to run all the IT, all our mailing lists and all that, but it's gone. Now the org still exists, but we're really not affiliated with it. But it's pretty easy to see on Meetup. We don't have money involved, so but that might be something that's worth looking into, whether that needs to be formalized. But that means we have to have a board and formal meetings, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure we're into that.
And I have enough to do without adding board meetings to the stuff I'm already doing. So we are looking for donation space. The one I'm thinking of will unfortunately end up having a little bit of marketing type stuff to go with talks, but that's going to kind of be the price we pay for the free space, to have a space without money.
So does anyone have a problem with, let's say we go to a company, let's say Microsoft, for that matter, right? Since they have space.
Pick a good fucking company.
and they want to spend 5 minutes talking about some of the cool stuff they're doing. Would that be a problem?
For him.
They use Bash.
Well, not Microsoft, but for another. Take out Microsoft and Oracle because I hate them.
Well,
but if they're gonna give me space to talk about shit to undermine them, I'm good with that. But would you guys be okay if we had to tolerate a short marketing thing to get free space so that more of you can attend. Does anyone have a problem with that?
It's free space.
It's free space. It's like, you know, free, you know, your free email. You pay a price, you just don't really see it. So, all right. With that being said, we'll start looking. I'll start hopefully, probably not next month, but in May, we'll hopefully have a new space, and I will try like hell to keep the same time.
So, about topics, because I don't think we closed that thing, would AWS has been more about system administration, like creating boxes, setting them up, and all that. Topics from the programming perspective, microservices, containerization, and stuff. Would that be the kind of stuff you guys are interested in? Or with system administration, like how do we manage 1,000 boxes at the same time? Or would we want to maybe have topics that dive into more, how does Linux work? Like, here's some aspects that may not be known, or here's how to do great bash stuff. Ideas? What are you struggling with? What are you comfortable talking about?
All of the above for me.
Yeah, I'm something which is not too advanced, not too basic.
Well, so that's all subjective, right? And looking around the group, we usually have both advanced and beginners around. So, you know, for the beginner, everything might be advanced. Right? But that's fine. We need to have topics for both groups. But AWS is certainly not Linux per se. Right? You can run Linux on it, but it doesn't have to be, which is cool. But would we want to do? I need ideas. I can talk about pretty much anything, but I don't want to pick a topic no one is interested in. And I know a lot of people that can talk about pretty much anything. So please, ideas, challenges.
All right, let's try this. How many of you are interested in more about Docker and containers and Kubernetes and Docker Swarm and all that crap? All right, how about configuration management? For example, Ansible, Salt, Puppet, shit like that. So that kind of gives us a clue.
Yeah, now I can certainly cover all the container stuff if you want to see me, but I can also find the engineers that makes the container stuff for me. There's lots of options. Just if you don't know me, that is my day job to talk about that stuff. So I come here to do other stuff, but I will be happy to go through
It's
some
kind of hard
practical
to
examples.
decide like which topic to choose. Like I work as a junior Linux admin, and you know, Linux is new to me as well. So I have to worry about administering Linux servers, securing Linux server, and also I have to learn about configuration management as well, and AWS. So these are all the things in this particular role.
Are you on our mailing list? Are you on our mailing list?
Yeah, we do.
Yes, I am.
Well, ask questions there, right? Because there's tons of. You don't have to wait till once a month to learn about something. Right? We can certainly cover things there. But right now the problem is we have no speakers at all. I'd rather have the problem of having 10 different topics and we have two months to do them, and have to pick between those. So if we can just get the topics out and just pick a couple of those, whatever you want, and we can cover them.
How about for next month, because she brought up a point. Do you have somebody that you could pick on to do securing servers?
You've got to speak up.
Securing servers, Linux security.
I can do that.
Yeah, I can.
Would
I
you be
can
willing to
certainly-
do that next
yeah,
month?
Yeah, both.
Well, it depends what date is it, because I have some.
It'll be the second Sunday, which is the Saturday, which is the 14th.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm flying from Singapore that day.
Yeah.
And
I can talk on the plane, but I'm not sure it's gonna help anyone.
but that might be a
Well, it
good.
depends on how we define security, but I can certainly cover how security works in the Linux world. If you're interested in it from a security from a government perspective, I can cover that too. But
Is that something that would interest you guys for next month? Okay.
We could do something like bash scripting, introduction to
We
bash.
can-
Yeah.
Yeah, we can have that as
I
well.
did. So we may want to put up a list, but put it on the mailing list we need to put it somewhere. For Fredlock, which is something we're expert, we have a document that everyone just updates the topics, and we need ideas. I can find people, but I want to make sure we have ideas from you guys, because we need you to show up.
And would anyone have an objection if I created a Google form, using Google Forms?
Sure.
Would that be all right?
A form or forum?
The form, F-O-R-M.
Okay.
Google Forms. And what it does is they'll fill it out and we get a spreadsheet.
Right. Well, it does, but what I really would like to do is everyone can see them and then vote on them too. But
Oh, I'd make the
Okay.
spreadsheet public.
okay.
So I'll work on that this weekend. I'll put a note in the meetup. And
But
so-
yeah, pick your topic, and we're enough here that work with people that can talk about stuff, or we can talk about it ourselves. So just figure out what you want to do.
Yeah, so. All right.
Without
further ado, Doug, and will talk to us about
Alrighty.
AWS Cloud Formation.
And
you
just
want
prior to that-
get Mark up.
Um,
He should be up here about 1:15, but
Yeah, he
still
said
not.
he's gonna come up at 20 past, actually.
I was going to say, I have a suggested topic just based on my own troubleshooting experiences and so on in recent history for a potential next presentation, and that is troubleshooting access permissions in AWS, actually. So specifically ways to do that. And what I mean by that is there's a facility called, two facilities. One is ALB access logs, load balancer access logs. The second is something called flow logs, which are VPC and subnet flow logs. Both of those things are ways to see what kind of traffic is coming into your environment and what kind of traffic is getting blocked from coming into your environment. So for example, if you're running a service and you can't reach it for some reason from outside, or some third-party service can't reach it, it's a way to figure out what it is that's preventing that. And associated with that is using what's called AWS Athena, which is a serverless database, or that's not the best term, it's a SQL type query for the data sitting in S3 logs. So anyway, that's just a suggested thing that if you have to deal with that kind of thing, I've found it extremely useful, both the access and flow log aspect, and then using Athena to see what's in those files, because there's a bunch of them and they're all in CSV and they're gzipped and so on. So anyway, I was just going to throw that out as a potential topic of interest. So, what we're going to talk today about is something that I've been messing around a fair amount with for a while, called AWS Cloud Formation. And it is a fascinating topic. It is not a trivial topic in general, but it's not difficult to use depending on what it is that you're doing. Like everything else, if you know how to use it, it's really easy. If you don't, it can be a little challenging at first. And that was my experience, definitely. It's not something that you just sit back and go, bam, I'm going to do me some cloud formation. But it is something that if somebody has already done some, you can make use of it really quickly. So the kind of things we're going to talk about are these guys. First, what is this thing? Why would you want to use it? Who cares? Tools that are similar from one aspect or another. These other tools that are sitting out there. Why it helped me specifically, things that I found useful in using CloudFormation. A little bit about what syntax looks like when you go and do it, because it's a lot of template-driven stuff, files with a specific syntax and types and so on and things. Something called nested stacks. This is what I've been really hammering on a lot lately. Show a few examples, go through some lesson learns, and then we'll do a live demo or show a video that hopefully will work or do something depending on time and so on. And lastly, a few little links. So I assume the mic is working. I can't tell if it's amplified or not, so I'm assuming everybody back can hear me. I generally project pretty well, but if you can't hear nothing, or you hear just static from my voice going, raise your hand and say so.
Hey, Doug?
Yes.
That mic is only for the screen.
Yeah. Maybe it's
Oh, I didn't realize that.
No,
Okay,
that's what-
I was thinking it was amplified to you all too. So okay.
No, I can hear you.
All right. First, I do a fair amount in AWS, and because of that, I've gotten the opportunity to explore a bunch of services, and that's something I like to do. There are a ton of things you can do in AWS, just a ton of them. It astounds me sometimes the breadth of things that are sitting out there, and it's difficult to even be aware of them, much less than conversant or make use of them. Every now and then, I swear, you just got to go browse the admin console. Now, why I say that is back in the old days, I mentioned that thing about DVD distribution, handing out DVDs. Back in the old days, way back in the old days, I used to flip through the man pages every now and then just to discover things, just for the heck of it. I haven't seen man pages in ages now. So The AWS console is that same way. There's 100+ things sitting in there. Some of them may be useful to you, some may not be. Sometimes it's hard to figure out what it is. So it's a good idea to be aware of these type of things. And CloudFormation is one of those things, because in any virtual environment, cloud environment I should say, or even virtual environment, trying to make one thing is easy. I'm going to make me a VM. Ah, got it. But wait, I've got to secure a VM, and wait, I've got to have it talk to something else, and wait a minute, I need to have subnets and security groups and access permissions and policies. That's where it gets more complicated, and that's where template-driven or provisioning environments make things quite a bit easier for you. So as you can see, the Amazon description of it is this, and that boils down to, make me some, I'm going to create a text file that describes something, and I want you to go out there and make that thing. That's really what this boils down to, and that thing can be a little bitty little bugger, or it can be a big old giant system. And we're going to show an example today of something that's more than just a trivial little thing. So, now, the reason that I like CloudFormation is, if you're in an AWS environment, it lets you stay within that ecosystem, and frankly you can go outside of it as well with CloudFormation, but it's just that idea that there are other things that you could use, but staying in that ecosystem has a number of advantages, and and this is only a few of them. They range from IAM, meaning, if you're not familiar with AWS, by the way, ask questions anytime or anything that I say in here. Accounts, permissions, access, etc. Meaning, make me a user account who's going to be using the facilities, and only give them access to this, or give them access to everything. That kind of boils down into IAM. Logging, meaning whatever's going on somewhere, you are probably going to want to see what it did later on, most likely. You may want to look at it in real time, you may want to look at it a week later. So Cloud Watch is what I'm talking about here. The CLI, everything that we see done today, you can do at the CLI. And in fact, I'm a big proponent of that, and here's the reason why. If you use the admin console to create stuff, you got click, oh, that works well, click, click, I'm going to make me a subnet, I'm going to launch me an instance, click, 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 make this big old environment, everything's working. Now tell someone else how you did that. Well, I'll go back and I'll take screenshots, and I'll write down instructions and say, go to this page and type something like this, it might be different, then click here and then do that. So an example, some time ago, I bit myself because I was in a hurry. I needed to create some stuff, created it, and then I needed to document it. I had 35 pages of screenshots with little intervening sentences saying, you need to do this, here's how you do that, and highlight a graphic in there saying go to this box and type here. And I knew, don't do this. Don't do the admin console more than a prototype. Always automate. Always automate your creation. Always. Because if you do that, it becomes easy to say, make me a thing. And all that works, and you just sit back and watch it. Or give it to somebody else to make that thing. All they got to do is execute that thing. I'm really a proponent of provisioning with automation, because if you do that admin console, it will bite you, I guarantee it. Because the next time you go to do it, you're going to make it, and it's going to be a little bit different than the last time. And it mostly works, almost works, but I created it all again, but I can't get to this, and I'm not sure why I did something wrong. Let's go back through those 35 pages of screenshots and look and see what was done. So my point being this. Always go to automation to create things. That automation, CLI or whatever it is, but it will probably be CLI, frankly. Always, no matter what. And then obviously the admin console gives you all kinds of neat things you can do sitting up there. So my process, my personal workflow is generally kind of fiddle around with that admin console, and then right away hit that CLI. Use CloudFormation or just use basic CLI commands, because you can script those. You can't script the admin console. Now, the CLI is just doing REST requests or SDK requests to the backend exactly like the admin console is doing, frankly. So you're actually doing it when you're on the admin console, but it's really hard to reproduce that. So anyway, reasons to use CloudFormation. Now, main thing here, if you're using CloudFormation to do the whole shebang, you don't got to install nothing else. You don't need to understand anything else. You don't need to buy anything else. You don't need to set up other stuff, et cetera. I mean, it's just that idea of being encapsulated within a system. So that is a pro for me. So CloudFormation is comprehensive, meaning as far as I know, it will do everything that you might want to do within the AWS ecosystem. I haven't encountered anything yet that it can't do, but That being said, it may take a little more time to figure out depending on how or what it is you're doing. In fact, one of the things I wanted to do, I'm showing in an example, I could not figure out how to do. I'm bugging the crap out of me, and I still don't know how to do it. And I need to, so I'm gonna be spending some more time on that. Package all your stuff into one or more templates, meaning everything you want to create, do, etc., you can do in template files. I guarantee it. If you can't, it's just because, like me, there's some lack of knowledge, some little tidbit you don't know yet. But you can do it, and therefore it becomes repeatable. And there are a lot of benefits to that repeatability, and I'll talk about those some in the lessons learned down the line. Now, you don't have to only use AWS stuff. The templates or CloudFormation will let you install outside things. In fact, one of the demos I wanted to do was an OpenShift install as part of CloudFormation. But when I went through my instructions, there were just too many of them to try to describe. And I'll say where it was that I was going to do that, and how we're going to do it. We're just going to do a trivial little thing in the CloudFormation template. But that was one of the things I had for quite a while, was doing an OpenShift installation. It just ended up pages of screenshots basically inside, or code, pre-formatted code inside this, which is real hard to do in a presentation, frankly. So, that's one of the main things. Think about this. I'll give you an example. In the old days, when I was young, if you had a vendor out there with some great far out tool and you wanted to try that tool, you got to their website. Their website said, contact our sales rep, find him out of this list, send him an email, tell him you want a demo of it. He will contact some other organization. He'll get back with you. He'll send you a license key and some installation instructions, and just follow these instructions and you can try our product. Now, here's the contrast to that. Some years ago, I was doing some stuff with Splunk, and I needed to run my own Splunk big time. I wanted to, because I couldn't configure what it was that I was doing for this client, because I didn't have admin level access to Splunk. So I was sitting there thinking, all right, how can I do that? So I went to the AWS Marketplace, searched on Splunk. The first thing that showed up was, here, run your own Splunk. You can run it for free other than the EC2 cost. It'll ingest up to 500 megabytes a day, and it's fully capable, 100%. So I said, all right, run that Splunk. 10 minutes later, I had a fully functioning Splunk environment, worked perfectly. I did not need to contact nobody. I did not need to get a license key from nobody. I didn't need to do any of these things. My point is this: if you're selling a product or you've got a tool of some kind, if you put impediments between the person that says, hey, I'd like to try this, to where they're trying it, if you put impediments like, talk to a sales rep, he'll get back with you if you're big enough. If you're just a little guy, you might not, but he'll get back someday. He'll send you a license key, you can go through the installation, etc. So my point being automation, I come back to that deal, is if you're trying to show a product, somebody should be able to say, hey, this looks neat, go. And then they should be able to use that product. Now in a limited fashion, limited time, limited something, obviously, but they should be able to do that PDQ, or else they're going to go, oh, God, I'm not going to talk to a sales guy. I'll find another tool, because there's competitors out there. I guarantee you, if you're selling or supporting a product, there's another competitor out there that will take the shoes off your baby's feet, for lack of a better term, in a heartbeat. Don't put impediments between somebody finding your thing and doing your thing, one way or the other. So, that point being, CloudFormation will let you create this whole shebang and get it going in a hurry without a whole lot of user interaction. And I'll show you, we're going to actually do that with a really good reference architecture they have. So, blah, 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 blah. This is one of the reasons you might use it. Now, this as well. It is not trivial to make a big old deal. Subnet security groups, route tables, ALBs, EC2, ECS clusters, that is not a small thing to do all that. So finding an existing thing that does something similar to what you want and taking that and then evolving that will be 100 times easier than starting with a blank slate and say, drag and drop. I'm going to put me some stuff in here and build an environment. And unless you're a pro, a few days later, you're going to say, oh, forget it. So that was my experience as well. So always start with you'll probably always start with existing templates that do something analogous to what you want, that you can then tweak, tune, or do whatever. You don't have to know all the ins and outs or specifics. Now, related things. Here are the terms you can see, and I've heard a couple of them mentioned already. So, CloudFormation, I would say, is a provisioning tool. It means let me describe something, and then you go out and make it. So the tools that you're going to hear that are similar in terms of functionality, etc., and I've only had experience with a couple of these, are these kind of names. You're going to hear the term Ansible in this realm. Ansible, Terraform, Chef, Puppet, SaltStack, Red Hat CloudForms. I've fiddled around with several of those. I've used CloudForms off and on. So in other words, provisioning isn't a limited area. It's a broad area, a number of different tools. Some of them have advantages over others. One of them, Ansible, you don't have to have an instance or a server that's just doing that. You don't have to configure all sorts of things on the destination. Ansible, for example, could use SSH to do whatever you want to do on instances. So that's just one case. But the drawback of CloudFormation, again, is it's not necessarily trivial. These other tools may bring you an easier UI, a more packaged environment. So I'm not saying CloudFormation is the only tool that you can use, obviously. All of these have advantages, pros and cons, etc. Some of them are easy to use than others. So anyway, that's just my point. These are the type of terms you'll hear in this domain of knowledge of provisioning. So, where did it help me? I wish I could have a license plate that would let a lot of characters in it, because my data center is YAML file. Meaning, the idea of I'm going to buy me some servers, and I got to get a rack, and I got to find a place to put that, and I got to get some power to that, and I need cooling, I need air conditioning or heating and all. I got to have water and all them things. That is so years ago. I cannot imagine doing that anymore. I just can't. I like the idea of saying, let's see, I need an environment. Go make it. Okay? And there you go. And you got you an environment. It may take a minute, 5 minutes, could take an hour or whatever it is, but the idea that you can virtually create these things in a cloud specifically is just so great compared to way back when we would put out an RFP and we get bids back from vendors and we'd start doing stuff, and then we'd try and figure out what kind of capacity we needed, because we got to plan that capacity in advance, and because of that, well, we got to have at least 25% reserve capacity, so you got to buy up more hardware than you need. All those days are just bad memories because they slow your butt down. Instead, you should be able to say, make me an environment. Okay, 5 minutes later, you got you an environment that is whatever size you want it to be. One little guy or a ton of servers. So anyway, on top of that, make it again. Make me another one. Make me a third one. Let them all sit side by side. The example we're going to show will let you do exactly that with an ECS cluster, a container cluster in AWS. The reason why this is beneficial, make me another one, make me another one, make me another one, is automated regression testing. Let's say your plan for your system is, I'm going to have a development environment, and we're going to have a test environment, we're going to have a production environment. And all our code is going to be put in the test environment. We're going to test, well, we need a test environment that's stable, and then we need another test environment that has one that we fold changes in at a more controlled basis. And then that's where we're going to do automated regression testing. Or you could say, we need to run a system-level automated regression test. All right, create an environment. Dedicated, all it's going to be dedicated to that. Run your regression test, terminate that thing. This is a key thing about this idea of CloudFormation or any provisioning tool, is that there was something that was said at reInvent last year that Werner Vogels, the CTO of Amazon, said that was really important. Don't pay for idle. In the old days, we're going to stand up a system and we're going to pay for that 24/7. We're going to run it, power, operations, all them things. We're going to run that thing for 24/7. During the daytime at 4 p.m. on a Friday, our request level is this. Our traffic, we're getting this much traffic. 2 a.m. on a Saturday, we're getting this much traffic. But we're still paying for all them hosts 24/7, whether we're using them or not. Now, the point Werner was making is, if you need the capacity, provision it now. When you don't need it, get rid of that sucker. Don't waste your money. If you're paying for resources that you're not using, if you're paying for 50 servers on a Saturday morning and you got one developer working on one of them, that money right there is lost opportunity cost. I mean, you could use that money for something useful. Hire somebody to do something else. Build something new. If you're not provisioning what you need when you need it, you are wasting money on something you could be using otherwise. So that's my spiel on the idea of these provisioning environments. If you can provision on the fly, make it, blow it away when you're finished. Now, namespace. That's one of the key things to think about when you're creating these type of things. Have everything based off some name at the bottom, and you're going to see an example of that when we do that in a bit. Meaning, you should be able to call dev1, dev2, dev3, dev4, and have them entirely independent of each other than that base name. So the resources you create under that name are all based on that base cluster, basically. So that cluster is the example you'll be seeing. So again, it's just that idea. You should be able to create that thing sideways as many times as you want without having to change your configuration and fiddle with site or address blocks and all them things. Automated regression testing. If you can create your environment on the fly and you got automated regression tests, tell Jenkins, when you do a build, go create me an environment, run those tests, and then terminate that environment. And I do this regularly. Works like a champ. We only need the environment for an hour, 30 minutes, 4 hours. The other 20-some hours of the day, I don't want to pay for that thing. I don't want to just lay in there doing nothing. So, another part of this is something I'm keen on, and I'm not always successful convincing people of. If you're writing software, and you're going to put that new software out there, right alongside that should be a dashboard that says how to monitor that software. CloudWatch, in the case I'm most familiar with, or Splunk or some of the others. Software should come with a dashboard, meaning you shouldn't say, here you go, ops. Now, while it's running, you look at the log files, and if you see something that looks bad, and maybe you got a customer complaining, call me up any time of the day, like 2 a.m. on a Saturday, like I've had happen years ago. If instead, as part of your provisioning process, create these services and create the dashboards to monitor them, ops should be able to quickly go to a dashboard that's associated with your service, your system, whatever, and look and see, is something bad happening? Is something good happening? Is something different happening today than 24 hours ago? So that's one of my points on this. When you have automated provisioning, it becomes easier to do that kind of thing, to include that in your provisioning, include monitoring on top of it. So, CloudFormation syntax can be YAML or JSON. It didn't always used to be that way, and I forget which one came first. So, that being said, YAML and JSON both have pros and cons. If you like YAML, you have comments in there, works real well, works real good. Damn, I got a tab wrong. Oh, I forgot a colon, etc. Those types. YAML can be a pain for that reason, but it can be easier to read visually. I mean, just literally eyeball it. You can see YAML a bit easier. But you can have subtle problems in there caused by indentation or a dash in the wrong place at the start of the line, indented. That can take a little while to figure out, which means whatever tool you're using for provisioning, particularly if you're creating the template files yourself, there needs to be some kind of validation, syntax checker, etc. associated with it. And we'll see an example of that later on in CloudFormation. It has a validate template function. Because if you make a mistake in a template that takes an hour to create, and that mistake is the last freaking step in the process, like I did a few days ago, 50 minutes into the creation process, it says, I can't go no further, there's a problem here, roll back, and all that stuff deletes. Because I made a stupid typo, and I didn't validate my own stupid templates, even though I had a command to go validate my templates. So I decided that this change isn't going to hurt anything, and I was wrong. So, YAML and JSON. One or the other, you got to use it. That's what it comes down to. Whichever one you're comfortable with, it'll do either. In fact, one of the things I'm responsible for now, I got a little bit of both. I've got YAML for some stuff, JSON for the other. Because the working example I found, I started with YAML. The working example I found for some RDS was JSON. So I said, doesn't matter to me, it just works. So there you go.
Have you encountered any issues with using the tagging feature?
Okay, the question is tagging?
The tagging feature?
Yes.
When you tag your resources?
Yes, the issues are only this. I've never had a problem tagging. What's the question is using tagging in CloudFormation. Tags are things you can assign to resources. Random things, a set of names like name, project, environment, charge code, or something like that. So when that resource gets created, that little tag gets attached to it. It becomes a lot easier later on for costing to say all these resources are due to this project or this guy or this area over here, and these other ones are due to this. So the only issue I've had with tagging is there are some resources that you can't tag. CloudFormation will tag anything that can be tagged, but there are a few that don't accept tags. And I can't think of what they are, but I have a few of them right now where they're kind of dangling from a cost perspective. So the cost people can look at it and say, we can see all this stuff, what's this over here that's costing me $1 a day? And I wish I could think of what they are right now. They were like EIPs or I can't think of what it was, but there is at least a few things that can't be tagged. What I have found is anything that can be tagged, it is supported by CloudFormation. So does that answer your question? Yep. Tagging is important. If you're working in an enterprise environment, or even conceivably in a personal, let's say you're an individual contractor, you're doing work for different folks, you're doing it in AWS, and you're spinning up stuff, putting down stuff, and you're having to charge back later on. You're trying to do cost breakdowns to say, for this customer I did this stuff, and for this one I did this stuff. If you've got tags attached to your resources, it becomes a lot easier to be correct, honest, and legal as to what you're charging who for what it is that you created. Because there are some resources that are freaking expensive. I mean, recognize that about any cloud provider. Anything you create, most things you create, may have a cost with them. They probably do. That cost can range from 0.04 cents a minute to $4 a minute. And if you're running this thing 24/7, if you're running it 24/7, it's important you know why you did this when you go look at it after the fact. Another thing to recognize, this is an aside, this has to do with AWS in general. AWS is global, like most of the providers. They have different regions around the world. Your account may let you spin up resources anywhere, anytime, but that console shows you whatever region you have selected. US East, Northern Virginia, right? Nothing running nothing, good. A while back, I was doing something and I had been suspicious that we had something running in some other region. So I wrote this little shell script that would iterate through the regions and describe instances or something like that. Say it was running. And son of a gun, in Singapore, we had an instance running. And I said, why do we have an instance running in Singapore? So I jumped down to CloudTrail, said, here's the instance ID. Who created this thing? A month ago, someone had created that instance by accident because their console had switched to Singapore. They hadn't noticed that they'd done a launch. The next time they logged in, they were sent back to US East. They didn't see that instance. They said, well, that's strange. I'll start it up again. It must have crashed or whatever the reason was. Create it again. Meanwhile, this little dangler is sitting out here, clicking over on the clock. Dollars going for nothing. Don't pay for idle, etc. So the whole point being is just something to always be aware of when you're dealing with cloud providers such as AWS. Don't accidentally spin stuff up and forget about it. So always go back and look at your records to make sure what you think should be running is running, and nothing else. Anything else is funny. So back to the syntax. So CloudFormation templates have a syntax associated with them. They also have a number of sections in those. So 4 of the sections, and there are a couple of others actually. One is called parameters, another is conditions, resources, and outputs. What that means is this template says, I'm going to do something. I'm going to make me an EC2 instance. Well, you can hard code that, so every time you launch that thing, you're going to produce that same instance. Well, is it going to be a big instance or a little instance? Well, you're probably going to want to parameterize that. So there's a section in the template called parameters that let you pass in arguments, whatever, like instance type, instance size. I'm drawing a blank on the others right now, but environment, project, charge code. Those are examples of parameters that can be used later on. The next section is called conditions. Conditions is an interesting one that I found really valuable sometime recently. Conditions lets you take those parameters, or take anything for that matter, and make a decision. Create a Boolean, like the really good example I can't think of right now. Picture in your mind a really good example of why I did that. But it was really valuable, and it had to do with whether or not I wanted to do something. So conditions is logic that lets you decide whether you're going to do something or not, and then set a variable, set a parameter, set a resource, whatever associated with that. Create something, because create an RDS in a production environment only, but not in a dev environment. That's an example. So anyway, conditions let you make those kind of decisions. Resources is the serious section of the template. Resources says, I want to make me this thing. I want to make me an EC2 instance. I want to make a security group. I want to make a CloudWatch dashboard. We're going to see examples of those things. So the resources section of the template says something I want to create. Now, it may be only for the duration of that template. It may be only for part of the execution. But it says, make me a thing. Lastly, outputs. The output section of the template says, okay, I'm done making a thing. That thing exists out here. But let's say I created a load balancer. It might be a good idea to have the URL of that load balancer as part of the output of a template. I mean, you can describe it, discover it otherwise, but it really makes automation easier if you say, here's the stuff, here's what goes into, here's what goes out, it's basically, and in the middle, something gets created. So the output simply gives you a way to control and centralize what this template did. Now, colors are not helpful, so you may not be able to see what it says right there. I will say some of it. The syntax is this guy right here. So, by the way, the presentation is in GitHub repo, so you can certainly go to it and click it yourself. We're going to see this guy. This template resource type is a document, is a list of all the resources you can create. That's clickable. Click one of those things, it'll take you to that specific thing and tell you the properties, the syntax, behavior, stuff like that, that's inside of it. So for example, simplest possible case, let's say in your resources section, you have a template that has nothing but resources in it, and you want to create an EC2 instance. That description, that syntax, is this guy right here. What this says, if you can't see it, type AWS EC2 instance. That says, I want to make me an EC2 instance. And following that, you're going to have properties. There may be a few other things that I'm drawing a blank on, etc. But that says, that's the descriptor of what goes in there in terms of creating a resource. AWS EC2 instance. And there's a boatload of those. Example of one. So if you were going to launch an instance, this is what it would look like. This would actually work. Now, there's a whole bunch of other things associated with that wouldn't necessarily work. I mean, you might just fire up an instance and it's just going to sit there. You got to be able to SSH to it. You got to be able to get to that from a URL perspective. You got to be able to do run command from SSM. Any of those things out there. So, but from a basic perspective, it says simply create an instance. This is what it looks like. So what this says is template version, whatever, description. Say what this thing is, because you're always going to want to know, why does this thing exist? That example, EC2 instance running in Singapore. No name on the instance, no tag on the instance, no nothing on that instance. So it was one of the things that was aggravating. Always say why something exists. Always assign tags. Always. Whether that tag is something basic like project name or the reason you're running this instance, but always use tags, because eventually you're going to want to say, why is this thing running? Because it may run for an hour, it may run for a year. Somebody else may look at it and wonder, what was this thing? So what this says is description, resources. That's what I was saying earlier. Meaning the things that this template does is my EC2 instance, that's the name assigned to it. It's going to be an AWS EC2 instance. The image ID I want to launch is this guy right here. This was the current Amazon Linux instance as of a few days ago. So if you said CloudFormation, create stack name test, template this guy, it will launch an instance if your credentials allow you to launch that AMI in a default region, etc. So again, it comes back to whether you're allowed to do it or not. But in the end, this is fundamentally what CloudFormation template does. Now, let's go a little bit further. Let's say I wanted to launch something from the CLI. So once you create a template, that template can be on your machine, or it can be up in S3, one or the other. And the CLI can then create that stack for you. So again, if you're doing stuff with CloudFormation, you start with that console, drop back to the CLI, and start doing it that way, because it'll only benefit you. So what this says is, AWS CLI, that's what that is. CloudFormation section, create a stack, meaning some set of resources associated with this activity that I'm doing. The stack name in this case is going to be test01. Template URL. That's a URL to the S3 bucket that has the template that you want this thing to do. This can also say template body. That means the template's on my file, on my disk, my local machine where I'm running the CLI. So template URL, it's out there somewhere. Template body is sitting on my disk. Parameter or capabilities. Now, this template or complex template we'll look at later on is going to actually create some IAM activity. It's going to do some IAM activity. It needs to have that capability, which is not a default capability. So capabilities, I'm going to make me a named IAM policy. That's what this guy's saying. It's allowing you to do that. Otherwise, it's not going to default and give you that ability. It's going to crap out and say, nope, can't do this. You need to create an IAM role. Parameters. This is a parameter being passed into CloudFormation, into the template, basically. In other words, make me something based on this template, and here's the instance type, or here's the project name, or something like that. So it's that parameter begins to fill in the parameters section at the start of it, which may or may not be defaulted. So this is saying parameter key, parameter 1, parameter value, value 1. That's something real helpful, isn't it? Just an example of passing in parameters. And if the command actually stops here, if you were using template body rather than template URL, this is what the syntax would look like. Instead of saying template URL, the file's on my disk, template body, syntax file : // You can either say test1.yaml or test1.yaml, whichever it is. Either one will work, I think. So, but when it comes down to it, that's the way from the CLI. You can say, make me a big old thing or make me a little thing, and then make it again, 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 again. Let Jenkins make it, etc. All that is some of the benefits of saying some of these things. So, here's the thing to be aware of with CloudFormation. It's asynchronous, meaning when you say make something, the first thing it does, create a stack. When you do that, the first thing it does, look at the first, does that template exist, either on the disk or out there somewhere in S3. If it does exist, the next thing it does is do a syntax check. It's not uncommon to get poorly formed JSON or something. I can't think of what the error is. I've gotten that a number of times. Or your YAML looks stupid. You know, that kind of error. It's like, I can't do it because you didn't do the right job in creating a template. Once it says, yep, I'm satisfied, it looks to me like this syntax is correct, which doesn't guarantee that it will work, but its syntax is correct. It will then take that and fire off a job in the background, in effect. So it's asynchronous, meaning when the shell comes back, it doesn't mean it doesn't guarantee it's done. It has started that process, and that process can take a while, particularly if it's doing a cascading set of stuff, basically. So now, CloudFormation, the CLI, has a wait command. And take a look at AWS Cloud Formation wait, and after it, there's I think 4 or 5 things you can do. Examples are stack create complete or stack delete complete, and 2 or 3 others I can't think of right off the top of my head. That means if you're CLI, if you're scripting something, you can say go create something, and it started off the process. Next at the CLI, you can say, okay, wait for that to get done. Wait for that stack create complete to get done, or stack delete to get done. When that successfully completes or unsuccessfully completes, that wait's going to finish, and then it'll go back into the next step in the script. So just be aware, this is a useful thing to do. Not all templates will be instantaneous creation. They will not always be the same amount of time. You will probably, if you're doing stuff at CLI, you will probably need to block and wait for prior stuff to get done, and there are different approaches to that. This is just one of them. What it looks like again is this: AWS Cloud Formation wait, stack create complete, stack name. That's all it takes. Nothing more than that to cause it to wait on something. That's a useful thing. All right. Now, once AWS resources have been created, you can use the CLI to do describes, basically, to get information about those resources. There's EC2 level describe, there's CloudFormation describe. There's a crap load of these things that have different syntaxes, comments, format, different ways of doing it, and so on. So an example is this guy right here. AWS CloudFormation describe stacks, stack name test01, the one we just created. Query, give me the stack status. Something to keep in mind. Most of the, or very frequently, the output of describe commands will be a list, an array or something like that. It won't just be one thing. It will probably be more than one thing. So you will most likely have to do something a little more specific about what it is you're interested in. Because if I said describe instances, I may get back a list of 20 instances, 4 of them which are terminated but not gone yet. For example, they're not in a running state, or they're in a stop state. So it's just the point I'm trying to make is that you can get all the information you need at the CLI or using any of the SDKs, obviously. But just because, as a developer, say, for example, or a system administrator, you make one instance and it works, and you do a describe, you get that one instance back, great, that's all I need to do. In another environment, you might have 50 instances running. You need to constrain that, filter the output, query it specifically or something. So the point being is this is just an example of what it looks like to do a query. So what this will do is this will list all the CloudFormation stacks and just simply say what their status is. Here's a tidbit. CloudFormation stacks, when you say delete and it says delete complete, they are not gone. They actually lay there in a deleted state. They're not costing you anything, but they lay there in a deleted state for some period of days, and I can't think of what that number is. For some reason I'm thinking 90, but that can't be right. That's a long time. The reason I point that out is that earlier thing described stacks. Some of the output may be stack test 1 deleted, stack test 1 deleted, stack test 1 deleted, stack test 1 create complete. That may be the output of the CLI. You will see stuff that is deleted but not gone yet, and I forget why. There's a good reason for that. Once you're done with the stack, once you've created a set of cloud resources with CloudFormation, here's the other nice ability. Delete stack, stat name test 01. That's that example I was using earlier. Make me a thing, I'm going to use it for a while, delete me a thing, walk away. If you create a bunch of resources and then you want to delete them by hand, here's one of the challenges of that. And then anybody using AWS is probably familiar with it. Let's say I create me some subnets and some security groups and an EC2 instance, and I go and say, delete that EC2 instance. They say, no, there's a security group attached to it. You've got to delete that security group first. You go, well, I can't do that because the subnet's attached. Well, I mean, VPC, etc. In other words, you have to delete in the right order. So view it as a tree. You have to start deleting the leaves all the way down to the root, basically, before you can delete everything, or just have CloudFormation delete it. So if you create a stack with CloudFormation, you can delete a stack. So 2 commands, make me a thing, use it, delete me a thing, walk away. Yep?
So when you created it, in the CLI, you can get a status of, okay, whether it's created or not.
Yep.
Is there a way to, say you created like say 5 resources in that stack, is there a way to spit out all the things at a summary level that were created so that you can save it in your configuration?
You can, and in fact, you can. There are different ways to do that. There's both the CloudFormation level CLI, and then there's AWS CLI. You could actually do you can get a CloudFormation, list me the EC2 instances, and then use the AWS EC2 describe instance and go specifics for that. So, in other words, CloudFormation is giving you the relationship and associations level. To get specific instance information, you might get the instance ID from CloudFormation and then use AWS EC2 describe for that instance to get more specific. So it depends on what you want. What you'll see when I show this later on is I'll show the admin console that actually shows you the resources associated with the stack, and that would visually tell you everything you need to know. And anything you can see on the console you can do with the CLI, obviously. So you'll see an example of that. So the question, I should have said, the question was, how do you find out the resources that were created for a stack? There are several ways: admin console, CLI for CloudFormation, CLI for the resource specifically. So we'll show a little bit more of that later on.
Could you also, if the time permits, explain about some of the best practices of
Yes.
how you version it and how you manage
Absolutely, we're going to get to that when I have the lessons learned down towards the end, because the way to learn best practices is to not do a best practice and sit there and say, that was stupid. So tagging is a perfect example. Force tags. Nobody should be able to create something that doesn't have some kind of tag, whether that tag is their name, project name, or whatever. So that's the point of it. So we are going to go through a best practices thing, which is more lessons learned. Anything that lessons learned is best practice. Don't do this. That's how I learn stuff. Is do it wrong a few times, and then finally I say, that was stupid. That had to be somebody else's fault. I think so. Key thing: when you say delete, and it says, okay, I'm deleting, all it means is asynchronously it has started the deletion process, assuming that your command is right, and it knows what you're talking about, and the stack name exists. Once it says, yep, all these things are right, I'm on it, it starts going out there and goes trickling down from those tree leaves backwards. You can say delete stack, CloudFormation, wait, stack delete complete, stack name, and then out here on the end is the stack name, test 01 or something like that. So it's that point of when you're automating something that is asynchronous, you are probably going to have wait conditions that you need to do, right? Unless you can say delete stack and then you're done. In my case, for example, we have several things where we actually have several related stacks that are sitting on top of a base stack that exists. So I can't just say delete stack and base. I have to actually do some service deletes and then RDS deletes and then the template or the base delete. So anyway, we'll see a little more of that in a bit. What is this going to cost me? Cost is not a trivial thing. I mean, it's always important to have some idea what you're doing. You start launching C4 double extra larges, and after a month, you're going to notice it on your bill. Invariably. Nice thing about AWS, I can make something in a hurry. Everybody's all fat, dumb, and happy. 2 months later, somebody's saying, man, we're spending a lot of money. And that somebody that says that is probably the billing department, program manager, final customer. The point I'm trying to make on this is that always be aware or have some idea what something's going to cost you. Because just because you can quickly do it, eventually somebody's going to notice the bill when they start paying that bill. And they'll start saying, why are we spending so much money on cloud stuff? It's supposed to be cheap. I'm supposed to migrate to the cloud and I'm done. That never happens. You always will get somebody saying, why is our cloud bill so high? The reason it's high is you're doing something that's not a best practice. You're launching stuff and leaving it running 24/7 when you're not using it. Or you're launching too big of stuff. I'm going to make me a big old giant EC2 instance. CPU utilization 10%, 2%, but it's working. It's that, there's the trap. Make something, it's working, I'm done. I want to get away from it, I'll go to something else. Somebody's got to pay that bill. Here's one of the observations about cloud environments. Rarely do your developers or testers or whomever see that bill. They're saying, make me some stuff. Even the system administrators don't necessarily see the bill. That bill goes, first try to go to billing console and says, you don't got permission to look at that. That bill comes in accounts receivable, however billing works. Somebody else sees it and says, oh, man, I'm putting a lot of digits in this check. What's going on? It filters back to you eventually. The point I'm trying to make is from a personal practice, I do a lot of prototyping work in my personal AWS account. The reason being, I got to pay that bill. If I'm running a C4 double extra large to do OpenShift work, for example, and I do it for 2 days, and I'm just fiddling around, and I get that my AWS bill's up to $40 1 month or whatever it is, I say, well, that was stupid. I didn't need to run it 24/7, did I? I should have found a way to capture the state of where I'm at, terminate that thing at 6 p.m. and start it up again next morning, right back in that same state again. In other words, it becomes personally motivating when you got to pay the bill or you see the bill. So I'm not saying developers need access to the billing console or whomever can create AWS resources. Instead, they need to have some idea of what this is costing because they begin to matter. Now, here's a suggestion I gave Amazon a few years ago, and that was I think there's an opportunity in training. Developers don't care about the freaking cost. I got requirements, make me a thing, get it done, keep going, make the next thing, get it done, keep going, next thing, etc. You can't motivate a developer to save money on cloud resources. It's difficult to do that because you're giving them requirements. You can't say, make me a service that does this, and oh, by the way, it needs to be cheap. It's hard to satisfy that second requirement. Cost analysts don't understand the make me a resource, basically. They don't understand that side, and they don't want to, basically. Because if you got nothing better to do on the weekend than fiddle around with AWS and to change your life, cost analysts don't fiddle around with AWS on the weekend. The point being, you can incentivize cost analysts to keep costs down, to be aware of costs, if they understand how to read usage reports. They understand pricing plans. They understand reserved instances. They don't even know details. Here's so there is such a thing. They can see we're running a C4 double extra large at 1% CPU. You're doing something wrong. Make it a smaller instance. So if cost analysts were trained, or financial analysts, or whoever the right term is, if they were trained to recognize utilization and marry that up to pricing plans, billing, or whatever it is, they're the ones that can act as the governors in this and say, hey, this is costing us too much, your instances are too freaking large, and they're not being used anywhere near the capacity. Or they could say, why is this instance running 7 days a week, and it's only being used from Monday to Friday? So they'll raise those kind of. So the point being is I think there's a very good training opportunity, cost or financial people, to recognize how to do stuff and then figure out how to make it cheaper. And then go back and talk to the operations group, developers, whoever, to say, hey, we're spending a lot of money on this and it don't look like anybody's using it. So anyway, now I'll get back to this again. So CloudFormation, estimate template cost, template body, that same template body or template URL. Parameters. It's got to have these parameters before it can figure out what you're doing, like instance type or something like that, or whatever it is. So meaning you may have to pass some parameters. Here's an interesting approach. You say estimate template cost, it says, looks at it and says, okay, I understand this, I'm on it, asynchronous, it returns a link to the S3 or the cost calculator in AWS that's populated with what that template said to do. Make me 20 EC2 instances of C4 double extra large. That link will will take you to a filled-in cost calculator that says, here's what that's going to cost. And you might go, ooh, I don't want to do that. So, point being is it's a useful facility to give your customers some way to have some idea of what they're doing is about to cost them before they go and do it. Because there have been a couple of services in AWS that I haven't used because I can't tell what it's going to cost me to use it for a few hours personally. I mean, one of them, I can't think of what it was, but it said something like, this will cost you $5 for a terabyte. And I said, do I got a terabyte? I don't know in S3. I'm not sure. I don't want to find out the hard way, so I didn't use the thing. And so that's just the point. Always provide a facility to have somebody have some idea what it's going to cost them, whether it's $1 or $100. Nested stacks. This goes back to best practices. And that is one template can hold a boatload of stuff. It can have, and I hear me filming with my camera, by the way, if you see me do it. So one template can describe a crap load of stuff in there. Now, that's not necessarily good. It becomes hard to reuse one template in a different application because now you got to go in and modify that template to something else. Nested stacks are a base stack that has references to other templates you want to invoke. I mean, it's just abstraction or whatever the right term is. So you could have a giant template that says, make me a VPC by using the VPC template. Make me a bunch of security groups by using the security groups template. Make me an ECS cluster by using that. And that's what we're going to see an example of in a bit. And I know I jawbone a lot about this type of stuff, so anytime you have questions or if I'm saying something doesn't make any sense at all or I'm wrong, chime in because I've always viewed NOVALUG presentations as live wikis. Who's ever presenting is probably not the most knowledgeable person. I have always found that to be true. There's somebody in the audience that knows tidbits or a whole lot more than the presenter. So always don't hesitate to chime in and pass along extra information because it benefits everybody. Live wiki, that's my term for it. So the practice, don't make big old templates. Instead, put related things in templates that you can use independently. It also lets you test those related things independently. You don't need to create the whole shebang if all you're trying to do is confirm you can create a VPC. So have a VPC template that's a, for lack of a better term, child template or something like that, and then have the main one call that one. You can run that one independently of it. So we'll see some stuff like that. So here's another example of launching an EC2 instance. This is a little more filled in than the last one. What this says is, description once again, launch an instance and do something, because this is going to and do something. In this case, it says create file temp/test1 or something like that. Ran off side of the page. This is a complete template, by the way. Resources section. I want to make me an EC2 instance that the resource name is my EC2 instance. It's just a logical name within CloudFormation. Doesn't mean anything to anybody else. Just CloudFormation says this is how I refer to that in other places in the template. So again, it's type AWS EC2 instance. Properties. Describe the thing that you want to do. Typically, these will be parameters you pass in. In this case, I got it hard-coded, so it will fit on one page. The AMI you want to use for the launch, tags, right there. I want this instance tagged with a key of name and a value of EC21. Here's a benefit of tags that is not always obvious. When you go to the AWS admin console or the EC2 console and you see a list of instances running, there's a column in there that says name. If you just launch something without giving a name or any tags, that column's blank. That works fine if you only got one instance. If you got 5 instances launched for different purposes, if that name is not representative, it becomes harder to figure out what it is later on when you're fiddling around the console. If you apply a tag called key name value, that fills in that name for the instance. That'll show up in that column. So just a tidbit. IAM instance profile. This is what I did not describe. This is what I could not do, and I spent a few hours on this before I got irritated and said I need to put it down before I take the age-old method of taking that laptop and throw it right out the window. I was so irritated at the thing. IAM instance profile means what is this instance allowed to do? There's some amount of defaults associated with it. One of the things that is always, I have found to be always useful to do, enable SSM for that. And I talked about SSM in the past when I talked about something or other. SSM means there's a section of the EC2 console on the bottom left side says Systems Manager or something like that. under there you'll see a function called run command. Run command says I want to run this command on this instance, and it'll go do it for you asynchronously. The reason that's beneficial is if somebody doesn't need to have finger bones touching that instance, if they don't need to SSH to it, and there has to be a if they don't need to have finger bones on that, don't do that again. So, don't give direct SSH access unless you absolutely have to, and I have yet to find a situation where you absolutely have to. Use run command. Run command will let you put in a script, let you do whatever you want that you could do at the console at SSH other than run VI. And frankly, you never need to run VI. Use sed, use ed, use cat, redirect output, whatever it is you want. Since I've gotten this practice, by using SSM, I don't have a bastion host. Bastion hosts, typically small instances, don't cost a whole lot. Oh wait, we got to have the keys distributed so somebody can SSH to the bastion host. And then on that bastion host, we need the keys distributed so they can SSH to the instance. And what instance are they going to SSH? We got to keep that somewhere. Maybe we need to write a script, make it easier. Wait a minute, is that instance up to date? I need to update it. Is the security group set right? In other words, you're adding cost by creating a resource like a bastion host. A jump host is another term for it. Use SSM. This is why I'm saying this right here. So I have a profile in my account called SSM something or other that whenever I launch an instance, I attach that profile to it. And after the instance comes up, I can go to run command, do whatever I want on that instance. Just fine. Lastly, user data. This is another point where this comment up here, create file. User data is a base 64 encoded string. Let's say you want to run a script on that instance while it's launching or after it launches but before you use it. Whether you want to install OpenShift, whether you want to install some other tool, you want to do a yum update, whatever it is you want to do, put that in a script, base 64 of that thing, take that output of base 64, stick it right here, and CloudFormation, well this is EC2 really, will do that on that instance as it's coming up, and it'll be ready to go. That goes back to something I said previously about I need to run an instance and I got to do a lot of stuff and set things up on that instance, and because of that I don't want to terminate the thing at the end of the day because I don't want to have to do that again tomorrow morning, so I'm just going to let that run and pay for some idle time because I don't see the cost, somebody else sees the cost. Provisioning at runtime, at launch time, is a good idea because it encourages people to provision and deprovision on the fly. And tomorrow morning, do that same thing again just by saying create this stack. It'll yum install, yum update, install git, whatever it is you want. So that's just a point on something to be aware from a good idea. Now, this is what I said. Created a role in admin in IAM. I attached one policy, AWS EC2 role for SSM. At that point, that instance can be managed by run command, by SSM actually, which is a bigger subject. So let's go a little bit further. Make that stack. That little EC2, that little template I had earlier, this will launch an instance most likely for you and do the whole shebang. Now, here's another example of CloudFormation. And I know that a lot of this is some details that are going to make no sense to some people, make be too easy for other people. So always ask questions or whatever when you see stuff that doesn't make any sense. Here's another example of something you do in CloudFormation. Use the parameter store. So the parameters section of a template, when I launch an RDS instance, I want to use a snapshot for that RDS that's been done in the past, because now I can delete it at the end of the day and recreate it tomorrow when I want to, which encourages me to blow away stuff when I don't need it, recreate it on the fly. So this is saying AWS SSM parameter value some string. In other words, that's the type of thing in the parameter store that I want to use. I want to go and get. What I'm looking for, /dev/RDS/snapshot. There should be an RDS snapshot called a snapshot, or called whatever name it is that's associated with it. So anyway, that's just another example. You don't have to launch things with CloudFormation. You can refer to things. This is an example of doing that. It's not unusual to say, I'm going to make me an RDS instance that's going to create an endpoint to that database, and then I got to go to the console, or I got to use the CLI and find that endpoint. Or in the resources section, have something that takes that RDS endpoint and sticks it in the parameter store. So CloudFormation populates your logical names for something. So, so again, this may not make any sense. This says SSM parameter, the implication being I'm going to store something in the parameter store. I'm going to create an endpoint string for that database. Then I'm going to go and get the endpoint address for that database I've created, and I'm going to stick it all in the parameter store. So the point I'm trying to make here is CloudFormation, once it creates stuff, you can get the specifics of that and stick it somewhere more easily to get to than otherwise. So, a little bit more. For example, let's say these 4 lines right here I was saying earlier about populating user data or doing something on the instance during launch. I got a script, bin bash, yum update, install mlocate, update ev, yum install git. I got to do that every time I SSH to this instance. I launch it and I got to do this. Instead, take that script, send it to base 64, take the output, plunk it in that user data section, it'll do it for you on launch. Okay? Go a bit further. This is the whole thing I really wanted to talk about. This is a really good example of CloudFormation creating a more serious environment, and it's a really good reference for how CloudFormation works. So, let's take a seat and take a look-see at that. All right, now, all right, luckily, I got this guy right there. So that link takes you to this GitHub repo. It's in AWS Labs. This specific one, there's a boatload of reference architectures in there, really good working examples that say what this is. So, this thing is going to make me an ECS cluster and everything associated with that cluster. So if you like messing with containers and you want to do it in a more than just Docker run, this is an example of doing it. This whole template is going to create this little booger right here. I'll explain what we're talking about. Let's take a little look. So this is going to create, for lack of a better term, a whole system. The system is going to have infrastructure in it, it's going to have a load balancer, and it's going to have application services in it that you can get to. In other words, it's a working example of end-to-end in one stack, CloudFormation stack. So for example, what this says, it's going to make a VPC, a new VPC. That's an example of being able to do this multiple times in parallel. Just give it a different name each time. It'll spin this whole thing up completely independently of each other. They won't sit on top of each other. You don't got to worry about CIDR blocks. Multiple people can do it, etc. What this says is in this VPC, or attached to it, I want to have an internet gateway because my stuff inside need to be able to get out. That's how it does that. I want to have a load balancer. Yeah.
Like a 10,000 foot view, what's like the per hour cost of this whole thing if I were to spin this up just to play with it?
The configuration that I'm doing it in right now is only like $5 a day. This is using bigger instances that you don't need.
Right.
And we'll talk about in a minute. So if you were to create this cluster using T2 small or probably T2 small, it ends up being $5 for 24 hours of use, basically.
Okay, cool.
Uh-oh.
I was expecting like 100 a day or something.
Oh, no,
Okay.
exactly. And that, I'm not sure if that's me going out or it going out there here. So, we'll talk a little bit more about it, and we can actually do a estimate template cost on it. Funny, I just did that yesterday, in fact, for somebody. So, 2 availability zones. Reliability at that point, availability, whatever the right term is. ECS cluster. 2 instances in each AZ. Run me a container. I want to run me 2 containers. It's going to say, okay, I'm going to put one here, I'm going to put one here. We're going to register with a load balancer. You can get to those servers anywhere around the world, blow away one of those AZs, the other guy's still there. So, and I know some of this, again, some of this is going to make no sense to some of you, but you'll hear these terms frequently, particularly if you're talking about cloud environments. And on top of it, send all the logs to CloudWatch. So one set of templates is going to take care of this whole shebang. Let's go a little bit more into this. It explains what it's talking about here, and we're going to show some more specifics on it. You don't care about it. Let's say the point of this isn't ECS, it's just a good example of more serious cloud formation. So it's going to talk about all these things. Here are the actual templates right here that are in the repo. Let's go a little bit further there. Master, this is the guy that he just refers to all the other templates. This is the base stack or whatever you want to call it. There's an infrastructure directory that says here's a VPC, here's a template to create a VPC. Here's one to create security groups. Here's one to create load balancer. Here's one to create ECS cluster. Lifecycle hooks are beginning to be something cooler that I'm not sure that I haven't used it in this context yet. Then I want to deploy a product service and a website service inside that cluster. So running this thing will create a full-up thing that you can actually hit and do stuff with. Now, this goes through all the details of it. If instead I simply said launch stack in Northern Virginia, it's going to take you, well, we'll go ahead and launch it. And we're going to get there eventually. Here we go. Launch stack US East. Now, this is the CloudFormation console. You can go in and do something interactively using the UI, which I haven't talked about yet, or I haven't talked much about. The UI is a useful thing. It is not necessarily intuitive, and it is not necessarily context-oriented in terms of creating resources. So what I'm trying to say by that is that I find it useful to use as a reference. I have yet to successfully create something from scratch using that UI just because of me not knowing how to do it very well. If I understood the types better, I probably could. I could have a template sitting in this S3 bucket, or I could use the template that's already in place right now. Let's go do that guy. I'm going to use that one. We're going to call this test ECS 3. That's what I was talking about earlier, having everything based off of a name. Call this the root name for everything that's about to happen. And say next. I could put in tags. I almost never do this when I'm doing stuff personally, and I'm bad me. So we're going to say NOVALUG. I can do way more than what I'm about to do, obviously. Also, from a debugging perspective, when you're creating stacks, if something fails, by default, it'll roll it all back. It'll go delete, delete, delete. Everything I've done to this point, delete. That can be helpful so you don't provision stuff you can't use. It can be hard to debug. If you're not sitting there staring at it when it runs across a problem, if it rolls everything back, it says delete failed because of something or other way down 15 minutes ago. So you can tell it, don't roll back. So particularly if you're in a debug or testing situation where you're testing templates, you can tell it, don't roll everything back. When you fail, just stop where you're at right now, leave it all laying there, and I'll go look around, find the problem, fix it, and then I'll do it myself. So just to the point to make on that. I'm going to say next. Now, so this says, look at that, estimate cost for fun. I forgot that was there. So, this cluster right now, I think he's lying. This says 0, nothing 0. So, anyway, so don't believe this link. I don't think it's populated. Keep going back to here, but you can do it. We'll try an example of that. That's funny that I did that. Oh, I know why. Here's why. Estimate cost of this template. This is a master template that refers to other ones. It doesn't know, estimate cost doesn't propagate through all your templates. It simply takes the template you use. What it should be is estimate cost of the ECS cluster template. So, and that's what we'll try later. Anyway, let's keep going on this because this takes a little while. I acknowledge I'm about to spend some money. That's on my credit card. Okay, great. Here you go. So, I got other stacks that are sitting out here right now. This is what it actually looks like when CloudFormation is going off doing stuff. So, here's the base stack. It started the VPC creation, create in progress. Refresh this a few times. You can pick one of these guys. Look at the overview. This is the description section of the template. Here's the events that it's going through as part of the creation or deletion process. Here are the steps that are happening right now. Look at all this stuff that's happening. Create me an internet gateway, create me a VPC, create a subnet, create route tables, create subnets, more route table, update route tables, do whatever it is. Route table, route table, route table. Going to town. Creation's still in progress. Once this one has been successful, it'll then go to the next one, because starting with VPC is the root of everything else. Every time you do something, make a new VPC, do stuff in that VPC. There are nuances to that. You can always use your default VPC. That is a crutch that where other things have been done that you don't realize when you first try to go to automate and make a new one, you don't got internet gateway. Say, ah, crap. So the whole point being is the default VPC that's provisioned with your account already has some things done, but if you go out and create something new, those things haven't been done. You got to do them yourself. Anyway, but this template, this set takes care of all that. Let's keep going in here. Come on. I was hoping to go a little bit further. NAT gateways. They're being created right now. Looking up one of these guys, you can get specific event information, physical ID information. I could go to CloudTrail right now and search on this ID, find out the fact that I did it on now, basically. Let's keep going. We're gonna actually look at the templates while this is going on, because it's gonna take a while. It's gonna create 5 or 6 total stacks while it's doing it. So,
Don,
yeah.
Pardon me if this is a silly question, but I never saw an option for what operating system you wanted or anything like
it's a
that.
template. That AMI, that selection that was in the EC. Well, actually, let's go look at that. Let's say we wanted to go look at that thing. Let's go back here. Let's go to GitHub. Let's go to this guy. I PR'd that a while back. I actually added SSM support to it, and they took that PR some time ago. So I was pleased about that, because they were talking about creating a Bastion host. I said, don't do that. Use SSM. And I said, that makes sense. So I told them how to do it, and it worked. Good enough. So back to your question. Let's look at the master template, and then we're going to get to what your specific question was. The master template looks like this. Resources. I'm going to make me something in this section. I'm going to make a VPC. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to refer to another stack. So this is saying the type of this resource is another stack. Here's the template for that stack. This guy right here. Parameters I want to pass to that stack. It's got built-in CIDR blocks. I want to create me some security groups. It's going to be a stack. Here's the template for that stack. And I want to pass it the stack name this is based off of. So this says refer to the stack name that's being created right now. Parameterizing this type of stuff. I need to get the VPC ID for the security group, because I want security groups go in that VPC. That's an example of that. I want to make me an ALB. A stack. Here's the load balancer. So again, you could run any of these stacks independently as long as you provide the arguments for it and that the argument works. I'm going to make me an ECS cluster using this template, and that's where we're going to see the oh, actually, there you go right there, instance size, T2 large. So it's parameterized here. It's just not passed into the base. So in the master, you could have made a parameter instance type and then pass that into here to set that instance type and convey it. Right now, he just has it set here. T2 large.
A question.
Yeah.
So does the sequence of these blocks in the YAML matter in the master file? Or
yes. Now, you can force it by doing depends on. There's an attribute called depends on that says this resource depends on this resource, and this will wait until that gets done, for example. Or you can just do them in order. Doing in order right now, this is going just trickling down in the order that they go. Let's go back to the console for a minute just so you can see. Look at that. Got more stuff going on. The base stack still shows in progress because everything's not done yet. But the VPC is done. Now it's working on the security groups. So look at that security group. Pick that guy. Events. Here's where he's at right now. Create 4 different security groups or update them or whatever it is that he's doing. Now, parameters that were passed to this template. So each of the stacks will have each of these sets of tabs. They'll show you parameters that were given to them. That's a debug aid. How do you know if they got the right VPC ID, whatever it is? Let's go back to the VPC. Here's the parameters that were passed to him. We saw that in the master a minute ago. Here are the outputs from that template. All the subnet IDs, etc. So anyway, that's what it looks like as it's going through this process. Let's go back to here. So it's going to do a cluster, 4 large, 4 T2 large. There's going to be 2 in each AZ.
And he was looking for where you specify the template in what OS is on there.
That's AMI. AMI ID.
Yeah,
Oh,
but it's
you'll
not
see that in
listed
ECS.
there,
The ECS template will show that. That's what we're getting to in just a moment. Now, after those little boogers are done, deploy me a service. There's a simple little Go service in here for a product service and an application for a product service, another one for a website service. The website service talks to the product service. This is a working example of a whole shebang, including a couple applications, which is a useful thing. So deploy these two services. Don't worry about the life cycle looks, because that has to do with auto scaling to make the cluster bigger or smaller, depending on traffic. Lastly, output the URL for the product service, output the URL for the website service. So in the output section for this template, when everything's done, those should be populated. So now let's go look at the EC2 guy. So go back to this guy, go back to infrastructure, ECS cluster. Take a look at him. This has a little more complicated thing in it. This has something I didn't talk about earlier. Mappings. That's another section of the template. So someone could say, I want to launch me so I'm drawing a blank right, T2 large. Okay, well, what AMI do you want to use? What region do you want to be? What's your region set to? All those types of things are questions that you could specify, or you could allow it to do a lookup. This is an example of a lookup. If you're in US East 1, the AMI is going to be this guy. Here the AMI is per region, which means if you're not doing something global, you probably don't have to worry about this, or there's other ways to do this, frankly. This is just one way to do it. I just wanted to say this is what mappings look like, to be able to map one thing to another. Like you might pass the name dev. What does dev mean? Map that to something or other, a region or something like that. So just an example of usage of mappings. Let's go a little bit further. Resources. Got a logical resource called ECS cluster. It's called ECS cluster. It's going to be using this environment name, the name that I passed in from the start, the stack name basically. I need to make an auto scaling group. VPC, all these things are examples of all the arguments that are, or parameters that are being passed in for cluster creation. Launch configuration. During the launch, I want you to install the SSA, or it's going to install the SSM agent. You don't have to do that with Amazon Linux instances now. I want to install a few other things. I want to configure a few other things. This is an example of what I was saying about base 64ing something. You can do it in the template itself, or you can do it separately and just paste in the basic. Sorry, was there a question?
Yeah, right here. When you run one of those commands, can you get the output back, or is it just fire and forget?
This is fire and forget, but if any one of them fails, it will cause a launch failure. Okay. So the output will be preserved in CFN, the NIT log or something like that on the instance itself. So yes, you can see the output of commands, in fact, by going to the instance and looking around. Does that answer your question? Sure. Yep. Okay. Metadata. I want to create me some files. I want to update some files. In those files, I want to do things like configure the CLI for the region that's set right now, so you can use the CLI right away without having to do any configuration on it. I want to forward all of these logs to CloudWatch. That's what this section is doing. I want to set up service changes, so if code changes, it'll automatically do it. There's a whole bunch of details inside this. Create me a role associated with this. I'm going to attach policies to it, to this instance. This instance can do these things. Right here, this instance is allowed to do SSM commands, or to support SSM commands, run command, etc., that kind of stuff. Instance profile. Let's go a little bit further. So what we're going to do in a minute is we're going to get one of the AMIs and we're going to find out what that actually is. So that's an example of launching an ECS cluster. Let's go back up here to the AMI mapping for US East 1. Let's pick that guy. Let's go up to here. Let's say I was going to launch. Launch an instance. I forget how you do that. How do you search on AMI? I don't think this is right. There's a better way to do this. No, that's not what I want. I forget how to do it now. Anyway, you can take that AMI back. That's funny. How do you do that?
Under images, there's AMIs.
Could be though. I thought it'd be right here. I swear I thought I could search right here, so that's why I so cavalierly said, let's do that. AMI. There you go. There's what it is. That's fine. I wouldn't call that community. Anyway, so that's an Amazon Linux, ECS optimized, etc. So that's how, to answer your original question, that's how you know what the operating system is. Right? Let's go back and look at this cluster again, see what's going on. Look at that. Now, VPC's done, security done, ALB done, cluster has been created, deploy the website service and product service. That's what's happening right now. So that's where we're at in the process. Note the base still says create in progress. Okay. Let's look back here at, so we went through this guide. Let's go take a look at one of the services. Let's go back to the base services. Let's take a look at the product service. Here's the code for the product service. All it is a trivial little application that just returns a hard-coded JSON object that has product data as if you were talking to a database or something like that. Nope, it's going to build it. It's going to make a Docker image. That's what's going to get deployed. Let's go back to here. Here's what it looks like to provision a service with CloudFormation, an ECS cluster service. Parameters, where you want this thing to go, what the cluster is going to be deployed to. And these are all things you can do by hand at CLI, in fact, obviously you can. How many of these do you want? I want 2 product services. One will go in each AZ. What's the ALB that's going to register this with? Meaning that this service path to get to this guy, you got to go tell the ALB, so the ALB listener is set up to know what to do with it. And I know, again, some of these things are going to make no sense to some of you, but you'll hear these terms off and on. Here's the path to get to that service. It's going to register that path with the ALB listener. It's creating an ECS service. Here's what it depends on. Before it can do that, listener rule's got to be done. It doesn't want to deploy it, or it doesn't. A listener rule has to be created before this service is considered complete. Let's keep going down. Port within the container. What target groups? Going to create target groups, one in each AZ. We're going to call the container product service. We're going to look at this at the console in a moment. It's going to create that image. It's going to push it to ECR, the image repository. There you go, right there. Keep going down. Actually, I'm lying. This is the, oh yeah, this is the AWS repository, so never mind. Keep going down. It's going to create a log group in CloudWatch. It's going to be set 365, meaning after 366, and start attritioning off the old files. These are the kind of things you would look at. Before you cavalierly go and use something sitting out there and fire it up and let it run for a month, you're going to want to look at some of these things. You're probably going to want to tune them. Load balancer, we're going to register that path off of port 80 on the listener. Keep going down. The website's priority 1. This is priority 2 for products. We're going to allow this to do some stuff. So there's a range of things happening in here, but if you're doing ECS cluster work, this is a good working template for how to deploy service. That's one of the other nice things about these things is you get a working integrated environment when you're done. Let's go back here to the console. There we go. Look at that. The whole shebang is done right now. So if I go down to the base, I got a product service URL and a website URL. Let's take that product service URL. There's the output of the product service. That was that simple little Go app that just returns a hard-coded string, JSON that is. Go back here, go to the website service. Let's get that URL. There's a nuance to be aware of. The website service uses the product service. It does a REST call back through the ALB to get to the product list, and then it outputs it here. It's a good end-to-end test type situation. Can your containers get out? Can they get out and back again? So that's one of the things that's useful to be aware of in this. What were we doing? Let's see. Go back to here. Take a look at the resources that were created by this. Notice the resources that were created weren't the specific things. The resource was the nested stack, meaning this created an ALB stack. Here's the ARN for it. Here's the identifier for it. Created a ECS cluster. Here it is for that. So now let's go take a look at the cluster itself. Where is ECS? Let's get back to ECS. All right, here are the clusters that are running right now. I have some other stuff going on. Oh, they're stopped right now. I'm using CodeStar, which Cloud 9, which is done with CloudFormation. So you'll see some other stuff in my CloudFormation stack. So I got a cluster running right now called test ECS3. Got 2 services in it. Here are the tasks for those services. 2 on each side. I have AZ. ECS instances. Running 4 ECS instances. Notice this. So there's a more recent AMI than is what is in the templates right now. Anyway, that doesn't hurt anything. So I'm running 4 EC2 instances right here. You can pick one of them, go right to it if you want to. Here's the instance. What else? Let's see what else is of interest. Metrics. Go to this guy. After a week, if this says 1% memory, 1% CPU, you're probably over provisioned. And you can do that with CloudWatch and other stuff. I'm just saying you can look at the cluster real quickly and say, we're spending more money than we need to. Oh, how much memory is reserved right now? All this is ECS stuff that you're not interested in. So, let's go to CloudWatch. This is one of the nice things about this. Go to CloudWatch, logs. Let's say test ECS-1. All these logs are automatically forwarded to CloudWatch out of the box. And I go back to that again, end-to-end system. It's really nice to use these as working references. Let's go to another thing. Go to EC2. I keep talking about System Manager and Run Command. The lower left side of the EC2 console, which you might never even know is there unless you happen to scroll down there and say, look at that. What's this stuff down here? Managed instances. I got me 4 managed instances. I can do run command. I can do a variety of things on those instances. Let's say I'm going to do run command. And again, if you've never done this, you'll be completely lost. I'm just giving you an idea of what's happening right now. I want to run it on all 4 of my ECS cluster instances. I want to do an echo hey there, uptime, pwd ls minus l/10. You don't have to do this. It says you have to. I do not always do it. And I'm going to have it run out of the temp directory. That's not necessary. Testing something. Testing. Looking at a typo. My eyes are getting tired. I can't see good enough. Now, at this point, by the way, you can go down here, do this same command at the CLI like this. Except, every time I've had to do it, I've had to delete document type, I think, and something else. So, 2 of these things don't work in here, but other than that, the command works fine. Anyway, run. All 4 commands ran successfully. Pick one of them. Take a look at the output. View output. There it is. Hey there. Uptime. ls minus l/temp. Nothing's in it, so I should have picked some other directory. That's my whole point. I have yet to have somebody prove to me they need direct SSH access. And I'm still waiting. And I'll give them $1 if they do. So far, SSM has worked like a champ for me. Let's go back to CloudFormation. It seems like, was I going to show something else? Before I go and delete this thing, can't think of it right now. I'm sure there was something else I was going to do. So anyway, let's say I'm done with my regression testing, development, whatever it is I want to do. I am finished. We can do that separately. I'm all finished. Pick the base cluster, say delete. It'll start deleting the whole shebang. Now, I could pick any one of these childs and delete it and recreate it again if for some reason I wanted to, as long as it wasn't intermediate. But let's say I'm done with what I want to do. Go into here, test ECS3, delete stack. Bam. Go home. Do whatever it is you want, basically. Meaning everything necessary to blow this sucker away is happening right now, independent of me. Now, it may not always work. Let's go to, actually, what was that? Tell you what, while we're sitting here. What was it? T2 large, or I forget. What was the type? I think it said
T2 small. That's what you showed us, T2 large.
It said T2 large. Let's say T2 large. just to give you a rough idea. Does that sometimes happen? The way this is out of the box, $271 to run it for a month. I would change that T2 large to T2 small or micro or something like that. That's the one thing that is in here. So $271 a month is 271 divided by 30, $9 a day. So you don't got to change nothing. It'll cost you maybe $10 to use it per day. There'll be some other costs for trivial stuff, but in other words, it's not going to charge you $100. Just don't leave it running. Instead, when you're finished, delete in progress. This sucker's going all the way back through this. Now, the point I was trying to make here, let's go back to the presentation, wherever that is. I'm sure it's here somewhere. Oh, I bet I clicked the link, didn't I? So, let's do this. Let's go back to the presentation again. Here, put this guy. I've gotten in the habit of using Get Pitch for presentations, by the way. I'm satisfied with it. So let's go where we were. Launch. Create a cluster. This is where we were a minute ago. Let's go a little bit further. Lessons learned. There's always lessons learned, and nothing in life is free. So, number one lesson, and this isn't specific to CloudFormation. This has to do with anything you're doing. It's always automated. Do something at the console if you want. Break that habit, and then do it with CLI. Don't start doing more stuff and to build on top of something at the console. Do it with CLI and CloudFormation in effect. It will save you aggravation later, and you'll learn stuff. If nothing else, you'll learn some shell scripting in the end. Because you'll have a hard time making that same thing again. Invariably, and somebody else can't make it unless you tell them how to do it, and that's more effort than you think. Delete stacks. Sometimes deletes will fail. I have had this happen in a few occasions, so it's a good idea if you start deleting the stack, go back and check on it again later on, make sure it hasn't gotten hung up something. It is not 100%. I have a question. Oh yeah, I'm actually winding down. So that was a 15-minute warning.
Yeah, sorry.
So sometimes it will fail. Check on it. If you made a manual change to a resource, it might not be able to delete it. If you've added a security group or something, you've done something else, it's going to go through, try and delete what it knows about, and it says, I can't delete this because something else is sitting here, so I'm going to stop where I'm at, and it's up to you to finish it. You might have to do some manual cleanup if you've done manual tweaking. So don't assume that your $100 bazillion stack got deleted just because you did one command. Do something to check on it later, make sure it really did delete it, just in case. Because you can go in again and say delete it, you can fix whatever's wrong, delete it. It may have had a race condition. That's what blocked it. Just trying it one more time may do it. So always check to be sure it really did do it. Don't hard code stuff in your templates. Pass them in as a parameter section. You pass them in as parameters, and ideally use the parameter store. Parameter store is a great place to keep key value pair stuff. You can encrypt it. Now I'll pass another tidbit in a minute. Pass parameters between templates. In other words, don't have one template that you have something in and then by hand change the other template. Have the other template refer back to the first guy's outputs or refer back to the parameters or something like that. Use wait so that if at CLI or when you're doing it by hand or CloudFormation by hand, start to create. Wait till that's done if you need to before you start the next one. But you can do things in parallel as well. If they're not dependent on each other, do them in parallel. So, when you're creating any kind of resource in a template, concatenate that resource name with the base template name. That way you can, when you look at the console, you can always see what is this here for. Test ECS3-ALB or something like that. So that's just a practice of template creation. It also reduces any chance you got a name conflict. Here's a lesson learned. Database password. Just put it in parameter store. Parameter store supports secure string, an encrypted string. Nobody's ever got to see the real password. Great. CloudFormation doesn't support secure strings right now. Darn it. So go do some work, suddenly realize you can't actually do that. So it is something that's in their backlog. They're going to implement it at some point, but right now it doesn't support it. It's one of those provisos to be aware of. So do something by hand to prove that you can do it, and then do it with CloudFormation. This one costs a couple of days of work. because I just assumed that it would do it. That was so almost invariably start with an existing template, modify that, because it's not a trivial thing to do from scratch. And we'll show the UI in just a moment real quickly. You can do a stack update. You can change it, create a stack, update the template, and then do a stack update, and it will go figure out what's different and go apply that for you. That can take a while, I found, and I found that to be unpredictable. So I'm not particularly good at doing the stack update. Use outports, import value. That's another supported thing in the CloudFormation template syntax, so that you can say this template needs this template needs something over here, have it wait for it, have it get the output from that one. It's just something to know that exists. This can take a while. It can be lengthy. I've seen one template that takes more than an hour to go from end to end. Parameter store. Here's a tidbit. I had somebody pass this along at the AWS meetup recently. I did not know this. Let's say you've got some big old template that's going to create 1,000 RDS instances, and it's going to put those endpoints in the parameter store immediately. Parameter store actually has rate limits associated with it. You can't hit it but so hard per second. This happened to this guy. In fact, this guy I was talking to, he said that they had a hard lesson where they were hammering the parameter store and actually came back and said rate limited to so many per second. That is a fixed thing. It's not account specific. You can't go ask Amazon to speed up it. So you might need to govern some things that you're doing, because automation will do things in a hurry. Automation is really great for creating stuff in a hurry. It's really great for breaking things in a hurry too. You can break a lot of stuff real fast with automation. So in this case of this one, this was one that he said they did not know existed, and I didn't know either until he told me about it. So the point being, be careful about your automation doing a whole bunch of stuff really fast. Demo, we just did some of that. Links at the very end of it that says here's some useful tidbits for links. Let's go take a look at a couple of things, and then we are done. And by the way, again, interrupt me with questions. I got to remember what those couple of well, I'm probably getting all kinds of noise. All right, so cost calculator, we did that. Let's go take a look at one of these guys. User guide, obviously, that's always something you got to mess with eventually. Wanted. Dark. Here. Oh, I have a bad link in there. The way I did that link doesn't actually work. Wasn't that?
Yeah, that's just,
Which I hate things
yep.
like that.
You have to copy and paste.
All right, well, forget that. Let's do this. Let's go back to a template. Let's pick a thing. Quick way to get to it. Take this. I just want to show you what one of those links goes to. CloudFormation. Here's what those pages look like that describe those services. Meaning, in CloudFormation, this is CloudFormation user guide, template reference, resource type reference. Here's the syntax in JSON. Here's the same syntax in YAML. Here are the properties associated with that thing. Some of them are required, some are not required. Tells you how to do it, or tells you how to do stuff with it, I should say. Gives you examples. Let's go back, take a look at the types reference. Here's all the resources you can create in CloudFormation. Boatload is not descriptive of all the things that you can do. So you can do all sorts of neat stuff. Now, lastly, something flitted through my mind. Oh, the UI, that's what it was. That was the other thing. Okay, for example, delete still in progress. Design temp, this is what the UI looks like. The left-hand side, all the stuff you could do. Let's say I want to create me a VPC. Where it is, I don't know where it is. Anyway, pick something. Let's pick EC2. EC2 instance. Drag and drop. Got that thing sitting there right now. Okay. I want to make me internet gateway. These little dots around here, they are attach points. They let you say things like a volume attachment. I could create a volume attachment, drag and drop. I could pick a depends on, let's say depends on, drag it over here. There. This depends on that. This is what I'm not particularly good at. So But what you can do is take a template that you already have and use the designer, the UI, to look and see what the resources look like on it. So I mean, in effect, what you would start seeing is the base, that picture that was shown at the top of the repository, that picture showed VPC, you'd see something similar to that. It gives you an idea of what goes inside of it. So this is what I would like to get proficient at. I would also like to be younger and better looking. I do not know which will happen first. So once you start doing this, you can look inside here. You can see all the neat things associated with whatever you got selected. Blah 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 blah. You make a change, hit refresh, etc. I could also paste the URL to that thing, to this thing in there, but I won't do that right now because I think we're running out of time, and I know everybody is tired of hearing me jawboning. So all that being said, what kind of questions do you have that fit within 7? Oh, look at that. The stack is all gone. All gone. That was previous. These are other stacks. I've got a number of stacks out there right now. Note, with Cloud 9, the stack's created, but after you stop using it for 30 minutes, it actually spins it down. So the stack still exists, but you're not getting any instance costs at that point. So that may not make sense. The point being this. I got a number of stacks sitting out here. This was an old experiment that I did. That failed. Doesn't hurt anything. I'm not worried about it. The others are all still, the stack is active. The resources are not necessarily active. They're in quiescent, basically. So I know I just said a ton of stuff. Any other questions? Yes, there's questions back.
Since this is on Git pitch, I haven't been able to successfully save the presentation.
Oh, there's a link. Go to. I'm sorry. Yeah. Let me show you where that is. Go Git pitch. Go back to here. I think it's down. Go down to this guy. Here's the original repo right here. Go to that. That gets to here. Here's the presentation. And I'll bet I know what you're talking about.
Where's the save zip file? See that?
There's a download zip that will download the thing.
Go back to the presentation.
This guy.
And there, offline version zip. See, oh.
There you go. Offline. There you go.
I tried them, both failed. So.
You know, I tried to do the PDF and that didn't work. So, and I was wondering about that yesterday. I bet the guy doesn't know he's got a bug in his Git pitch stuff. So, I don't know. That's what it boils down to. But you can always view the presentation.
I can show the repo.
So yes, anyway, go back to the original repo to see the files anyway. And actually they work. It just doesn't render quite the same way. Meaning you can look at this as markdown, in fact. You can take this pitch and actually look at it in markdown form. But here, I mean, here's the presentation right here. The Git pitch adds a couple of things. One of them is this. That little markdown, it's not markdown, it adds on top of it the pluses and the dashes. What those are if we go back and look at the presentation, what those do is this. Let's go back to, should explain it. So dashes mean next page. These are dash separated. Next page. That little down arrow shows up. That means next page downward. It's in other words, other pages associated with this topic. That's what I'm trying to say. So I start hitting the down arrow to see that thing right there. So that's what that means. That's the difference. But other than that, the markdown is all right there and will all certainly work. So you can look at it exactly like this, and that's one view of it. The only thing you won't see are the pluses and minuses. It's just one page after the other. But everything in the presentation is in that markdown. So sorry. Any other questions? I know I was wordy. Needless to say, but this is not this is an interesting subject. It's interesting. It's a worthwhile subject, and it's a way to learn a lot of stuff.
Before people start leaving, if you came in late, just make sure you sign on the sign-in sheet. It's just basic tally to see how many was here. When you got done, I think we still have a couple of swags left, so if you want to leave with a coffee mug and all that, go up there before you leave. So. But anything, no more questions?
That was it.
Thank you, Doc.
Sorry about that.